Come for the land of the ice and snow with the midnight heart. Armor of the gods. All right. Let's see. The YouTube's telling me I'm live, so I must be live. Happy Friday. As I'm recording this. Whoops, I'm in the wrong spot. I jumped ahead of myself. A couple things on the docket today. Rarely do I get to read something early in the week and then actually play in it later on in the week, but by golly, it happened today. I'm getting some potential poor stream stats, so apologies if there's any buffering or any nonsense like that. Nothing I can do about it, but carry on. So hopefully there's not too much whatever happening. So hopefully it will go away in time. Beyond that, let me just make sure, since now I'm looking at technical stuff. Okay, because I had issues that other day with the audio volumes. Apparently my audio should be okay. So we're good there. All right. Ironsworn. If you missed the stream, what was it, Monday or Tuesday? I can't remember. We looked at Ironsworn. The mostly, or actually entirely, just the basic mechanics, going through it. It's an interesting system. And, well, let me just get into my thoughts, having actually played some of it now. So when we got to the game, we decided to go GM-less, which meant that we did have one player who actually, I don't think they were the most experienced with the rules, but they had the book and they had printed out some materials. They were, I guess, guiding us, right? So we didn't have a true GM, but we had, a player who was maybe taking on some of the GM-ish rules just in terms of being more on top of the mechanics, and had the book, was kind enough to have printed out some character sheets. I also wrote some notes on the back, and was kind of doing it, being that sort of, I guess, player plus, if you will, in terms of not running the game, but guiding the game. What we did, once we got settled, all that jazz, is we went through the world building questions, which is what I'm looking at here on this PDF, the truths. So we went and established the truths about our version of the Ironlands. And this, I think, was interesting because they're very top-down questions, and they're not bad. They're not bad questions. But I think now, in retrospect, not that I would replace what they have here, I almost feel like this maybe, and this is for us. So we were playing also with probably at the, I guess, the maximum of what they suggest. I want to say, what were we? We were, there was 1, 2, 3, there were 5 of us, right? Which I guess is slightly more than the suggested player size, which is 1 to 4 plus a GM, or 0 to 4, whatever. 1 to 4 players. I think it worked out okay, but I can see why they might suggest fewer players. Not that we didn't have a lot of conflicts necessarily, but more people, more points of view, more things going on. There's more of a chance that you're not necessarily aligned on what's happening. What we did with the truths questions was we voted on them. So we started with the old world, and I'll read through what they're giving, or at least the basics, and then I have marked down our answers. So the idea is you came from the old world a couple of generations ago, and one of the options is war. These savage clans called the Skuld invaded the kingdoms in the old world. Our forebears lost, and we, survivors fled, and we got here. The second option was, I wrote down, pestilence, which is there's a sickness that moved like a horrible wave across the old world, killing everybody, and of course folks fled, and that's how we got here. And then finally, famine. We were too many people, not enough resources. So what do? You leave, and we got to the Ironlands that way. We chose famine. We chose that our people got here escaping famine. I'm just going to write a note here in the chat about the fact that I understand that the signal might be the strongest. So apologies for any buggering, no buggering, buffering. Got a dodgy internet signal, apparently. Okay. I'll pin that too so people see it. So there we go. We did. We came up with, we looked at both, is it Greenland or is it Denmark kind of thing. And I think we felt like Greenland was too big. Maybe Denmark a little bit better. In terms of size, but still, we were trying to figure out, like, what is the vastness of space here? None of this says kind of right. And we don't get a sense of, we established that, well, we have, overall, there's communities that are sort of spread and isolated, many different types of leaders and all that stuff. Everybody defends, but it doesn't really say much about what is it in your, like, what is it where you are in your village. Now it's very much might be just a game thing. If we just didn't do that, we probably could have, maybe we should have. It didn't. What our village was like, it kind of didn't really come up for reasons I'll explain in a minute. Maybe we should have talked about, like, well, what is our village like and all that stuff. But so I guess what I was saying is, I almost think that if you played a little game of Kingdom, which is one of those another GM-less game where you essentially the game is just kind of building a kingdom, kind of a story of a place. And I think something like that might actually be a benefit, because you get some more of this ground level information that you don't necessarily get from this kind of really broad overview you do. Now, if you're playing this as a solo kind of journaling type game or just a solo game, you have a lot of time and sort of space for it to kind of think about these things and write them down. But when you're playing like we were, okay, we've got, I don't know, 4 hours or something, then, it seems more, it would be more useful to be able to kind of have something guided and maybe fairly quickly, like we did with this week, where you could kind of go through and set up some basic parameters for your local space. Like, here's our local space. This is what we got going on. But we didn't do that. Now, one of the players got a they sort of got inspired, and so they sort of put together. They had a quick idea in their brain about what the starting scenario was. So we did that, and the starting scenario they posited that we adapted was basically we had gone to another village for a festival of some kind. And when we came back, our village was destroyed. So when I mentioned that, we didn't really have to worry too much about what these things of our village. Ultimately, it's true, because we get there and it was destroyed. We did do our characters, which, that takes a little bit too. I went with something pretty generic. I've mentioned before that I don't have a great sense of, I'm not great at backstorying. I don't love doing backstories. They're not really my jam. I'm just not I'm not super interested in them. I really am mostly interested in what's kind of going forward. I didn't come into Ironsworn with having some great character concept. And I think this is where I find that I appreciate having classes and having just some rolling down the line kind of thing, because then I'm not hemming and hawing or trying to figure out, I don't, and this is where I think that having the more ground level approach, because I didn't know who this character was, what they knew beforehand. I don't really know much about the ground level. So if I had a class where I could pick a thing and say, hey, you got this kind of template, which I ended up kind of making myself, and it doesn't take much. I made sort of a hunter type. So I they give you an array, which I think is 1 score of 3, 2 scores of 2, and 2 scores of 1 that you spread along your attributes here. And I was going between Shadow and Wits. I ended up putting 3 in Wits, 2 in Shadow and Edge, which is your kind of distance. I think covers distance stuff. It's like your dex in a sense. And then 1 in Hard and Iron. So I kind of went with that array. And then I picked for my stuff, I picked a path called Slayer, which is basically like monster hunting and animal hunting. I picked a ritual that has to do with wearing animal skins. I forget what it's called, binding, I think. And I picked a hawk companion. So I went with and it wasn't hard to do that. And the person who was doing the guiding, they had all these cards for. I guess they have cards for all these, and I don't know if he printed them out himself. They'll look at maybe they printed, but he had them sleeved, which was cool. Got all these cards. It has all these things, and we were able to kind of pick through. It takes a little bit. You're kind of picking through, and there's a bunch of them between the rituals and the paths and the companions, and there's also combat skills. It's kind of a lot, and I actually think we did a pretty good job of narrowing in pretty quickly on what we were going to play, because that could easily be an analysis paralysis paradise of just there's all these different ones together. You don't know, as a system, like, well, I don't know if should I be looking for things that synergize, which I tried to do, because I just feel like as a concept, I want things to kind of like, well, what is this? I think it ends up being 16. It's because we were kind of going with young adults or kids. Like, who is this kid and what are they doing? Like, okay, I wanted something. Like, he's a hunter, so he's not going to me, it was just, okay, I'm going to pick kind of things that sort of fit this hunter rangery sort of prototype. Fine. So that takes a little while. And you got to look through the cards, and okay, so we got all that. And then we ended up in that scenario with, hey, we were all coming back from some festivity at a village, a different village, and we come back to our village and it is destroyed. And we leaned a lot on the oracles and those, and that was definitely an approach that I think some of us wanted to. I know I like leaning on that stuff, and I know someone else who was more experienced, that's not the way they normally played the game. They were a good sport about it. They didn't kind of fight the use of the oracles, but when we talked about it post game, they said that when they'd played as solo and then I guess as a duo, and in their experience that they did very little oracling, and they did a lot more of just coming up with something and only really getting to the oracles if they were really stuck, or if it's kind of more rare circumstances. I'm not so interested in that kind of game. I don't want to do, I guess, so for them, I guess there's more the kind of journaling aspect where you're writing and, I got great stuff, and you just kind of keep going. I like the oracles. I like to lean into that. I don't want, just me as a player, I think I'm not interested in doing the mostly storytelling. I could do that when I'm creating stuff for GMing, like I'm writing an adventure, or I'm doing whatever. Like or I'm GMing a game. Like I got that. I'm not looking for playing to give me that particular fix of tell the story. But I think other folks, it's absolutely valid, or like that's kind of what they're into. So I think how much you as a group, if you're playing Ironsworn, or your experience might be that you did a medium amount of oracles. Maybe we did more than average oracles, and some folks do very few oracles. But I think often I was looking for the oracle to like give me something, and I think I enjoy that puzzle too. Of, hey, the oracle spits something out at you. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, maybe it's odd, and you try to figure out, well, how does this make sense? How does this make sense? And I think there's me, and I know at least there's one other person who I think was kind of on the oracle bandwagon, kind of like we were. So we'd be like, oh, let's look at the oracle, right? So anyway, the opening scenario being, we arrive back in our village, the village is destroyed, and we started talking about, well, what happened to it, like where is anybody survived, and we kind of checking out. Oh, we also determined that one of those iron pillars. So one of the things we had determined when we'd come up with the iron pillars idea was somebody got the brainstorm of suggesting that the iron pillars, remember from why do they call these the iron lands, that the iron pillars move around. They don't stay in one place. There's not just iron pillars somewhere. They're moving. And so it reminded me of the Krull, like the Fortress of the Beast, that every day at dawn it vanishes and moves somewhere else, and it kind of a similar effect. Like they're kind of not there, then suddenly they're there, and no one really knows why, and they move around. So in our case, we get back to our village. The village is destroyed, and there's an iron pillar there. And so now we're kind of mixing. So this is where we're getting into kind of starting the game and also trying to pick out like what is our vow, right? Because the game is all about taking these vows and then trying to put yourself on a quest and trying to figure out the quest. So we thought that maybe the ultimate quest, the overall quest, is to figure out to kind of avenge the village. The village has been destroyed, and we must avenge you, and also right, but maybe the more short-term quest would be, well, just what happened to the village. And as we're rolling those dice, one of the players because I think one player you actually takes the vow and everyone else is kind of helping, rolled really well on the vow. They got that strong hit, I think it's called. So they get, it's like you get this sense of where to go. And remember, I think if you follow the stream of money, it's like, oh, you know what to go, and you kind of have some information, you kind of got it. And so what that became for us was that there was a bolt of lightning that struck this iron pillar, and in this flash there was kind of a vision of a battle and some kind of banner or flag or standard that was particular to this other village that gave us a sense of, oh, seems like this has to do with what we're doing, or they may have something to do with this. But we couldn't end the quest, obviously. It's a clue, but this clue gives us enough so that we know where we're going, which is we have to go to this other village that's maybe a day away. And I remember I said that we had said few villages scattered and isolated, and I guess they are, since we had to go a day to get to the next village. But maybe we didn't necessarily lean so much into the scattered parks. We went with human opponents, and they're not super far away, but they're not super close either. So anyway, okay, that's where we have to go. But we did go in the village. We did determine some things. We did delve a little bit. I think one person's family got. We started asking questions. Well, is everybody destroyed? Who's not destroyed? Is anybody? And I rolled dice, and my family was missing, and I decided that no, that they were missing beforehand. Like they had left me alone some days prior, to these events happening. So they were gone when this thing took place. They haven't come back yet. So when the battle took place, they were gone and they haven't come back. Someone else rolled some more dice, and their families were missing. And we kind of came up with a story that this village was really well known for being kind of like engineering or tinkering or making stuff and having lots of mills. We're known for our milling, and that these families operated they had several mills, maybe 4 or 6 mills, and these mills were operated by different families, and all those families were missing. We also tied it into a religious aspect. I think we rolled up some stuff about a god and had to do with a river ford. And we're like, oh, perfect. There, we mills, so rivers, and okay, great. Like this is kind of cool. And one of the players decided, like, oh yeah, I'm like a priest or priestess of this god, kind of by the mills. Okay, so that was cool. Then one of the players is playing like a younger child who is sort of reminds me a little bit of Wednesday Addams, kind of a little bit morbid. Said that she likes to play dead and stuff is kind of a joke, and she's got some rituals around communicating to the dead. And she actually took one of the body. She took the body of a younger sibling of one of the other characters and used their ritual to speak with the dead, to speak with that character, and they had a little bit of interaction there. And I think we ran into one of the things I think is going to be a struggle for me, for sure, potentially with other folks, depending on their background, was they asked kind of something like, well, what is the key to the underworld? Like, what is the key to the afterlife? Or some kind of big question, capital B, capital Q, like, Mr. Death, what is the afterlife kind of thing, right? And the other player, and the player who was playing this dead spirit was kind of just like, wow, and I think they were like, you can't, and their thing they're feeling was, you can't ask, like, I can't answer that. That's a huge question. You asked me just in the snap moment to tell you the entire, this whole, to set basically the spiritual reality of this world. Like, I can't do that. And the other player was like, just come on, just give me something, and it just ended up with like, I think the excuse was like, I don't know, I just got here, I haven't figured it out yet, kind of thing, right? So it ended up being kind of funny, but I think that there is like a real challenge there for some people, and I'm certainly going to be one, is if someone, I don't know, is there an etiquette around these kind of games in terms of what you can either probably a couple things. The etiquette around what questions one particular player can just establish. Like how much of a chunk of reality can you in one moment just set? Like, could one of us have just said, like, this is the way the afterlife works? This is death. This is life and death. This is blam. Throw it out there. And then I was like, well, that's all right. Okay, that's it. Kind of thing. Is that a question that anyone should, since we're playing in this sort of shared world and we're doing collaboration stuff, like the one player kind of put it in another one player's lap of basically answer me this central world question, and the other player didn't really feel comfortable doing that or even prepared to do it. And I think from the standpoint of should you be able to do that, and I think part of what we struggled with, I think just as a group, was trying to figure out that cadence of, well, how much fiction are we sort of establishing and as we're taking turns doing stuff, like how much is appropriate for one player to take upon their plate and just say, here's how this blah, blah, big thing works. And I think you'd want to figure that out, and in this being maybe the first kind of story game kind of thing I've done. I mean, I did play a kind of a GM-less Microscope / Kingdom kind of game a couple of years ago, but I haven't played in a lot of story games, so that's definitely something that maybe there's guidance in Ironsworn about it, and I just glossed over. But I do think that's something that figure out, like, okay, well, how much of what's a good chunk? Like, what are we supposed to do? And I think in the player who was more experienced, we talked about it after the session, did mention that, when they were playing, they really did really small chunks. Like, just what do you see? Like, what do you do? Just like the next step. Like, you're not running ahead with the narrative or kind of with the world. You're just, baby steps, right? Just take a little step. Like, come in the room. What do you see? Okay, we're going to stop that. Not kind of do a whole short story worth of narrative or do a big chunk in the world. But at the same time, they were the one that asked the question of, like, what is the afterlife? So clearly there's wiggle, clearly we're all, kind of taking it as it comes, so to speak. Ian says, I think the answer is what you can get away with. And that's probably true, right? But I don't know that that's a way that I think that's, if you played just like that, like, I guess playing this game and then thinking about what if I was going to run Ironsworn for a group, I would want to, that's something I was thinking about afterwards, which I'll get into kind of more of my thoughts after. It's kind of like, that's something I'd want to set a guideline, because this is one of those things I think where you can, if you're not on the same wavelength with the other players, or not even so much on the same way that you have different ideas and stuff, that's where you can really step on people's toes or create the bad kind of conflict where someone's taking them on themselves and just throwing and creating these big chunks of story or big chunks of world, and no one else is really into it, and they're not really asking, because that's the other thing is like the player who got asked just kind of stopped, right? Like, I don't know yet, and just kind of threw that. Another thing they could have done, or if it was me, we could have done, was say, throw it up into the group or say, let's get the Oracle involved, right? But I think if I was going to play, I'd want to set some kind of guideline, because I think that I could see that as being one of the pitfalls. When you're playing by yourself, obviously, it doesn't matter. Do what you want. And maybe if you're playing a duo and you're both seeing things the same way, but especially when you're playing with a larger group who's obviously going to have more ideas, you probably want to kind of establish things. Ian says, I think you need some kind of mechanical or procedural guidance. Yes, some kind of guidance. I don't think it has to be mechanical or procedural necessarily. Some kind of guidance, something that says, if it's the person, because remember, we were playing, in case you missed it, Ian, we were playing GM-less, but with someone who's acting as a guide, right? That if someone is acting as the more guide, mentoring the rest of the party through, maybe the mentor steps in and suggests something. It could be where we all just say, something almost like, not an X card, but almost saying, hey, if someone's jumping too far ahead, we could slap down we could raise our hand and we'll do some kind of powwow about it. And I guess that would fall under procedural, I guess. I don't know if it has to be formal, is what I'm saying. But I think definitely, if not formal, then some kind of informal thing of, okay, let's talk this out. Let's think this out before we suddenly create this big blob of world that maybe we don't all necessarily agree with, or we just want to think it out because it's a big thing. Once you say, like, this is what the afterlife is, then, that's just a big thing. And maybe I don't think that one player wanted that responsibility by themselves of just stating that for the world. So it was kind of like, what do we do? So in any case, so we had that kind of, we played out, I guess I'm just going to use the parlance. We played out that scene, and then it was like, okay, well, we kind of have direction. We know where to go. So let's go. So I was the one I had the most wildernessy kind of character. So I rolled. So then you go on the journey. Sorry. So the other thing, I think we decided, because we knew we were playing this one session, kind of an intro, when you kind of set your own difficulties for things, right? So there are these. Let's see if they have it on the sheet. Yeah. So if you look at my sheet here, I marked it down. You have these different levels, right? It goes troublesome, dangerous, formidable, extreme, epic. And basically that has to do with how quickly you fill in these boxes. When you're filling in, so you have to fill in, you can fill in up to 10 boxes. There are 10 boxes here. And what you do is you start filling them in. And when you decide you want to try to end the quest, you don't have to have everything filled out. But when you decide to end the quest, instead of rolling a die, you use how many boxes you fill, and you roll the 2 challenge dice. And you have to, if you want a strong hit is your value, which in our case would be how many boxes you filled out, is higher than both dice. A weak hit, kind of your mixed success, is your you surpass one die but not the other die, and then a miss is you're lesser than both dice. So, and I think I'd asked a couple times during the stream if zeros on the D10s was 10s or zeros, and it turns out they're 10s, which I guess makes sense that you're never guaranteed a strong success, or like a crit kind of success, but you are guaranteed some sort of success, because if you fill out all 10 and you roll the challenge dice and you get a 10, the worst that can happen is you get a weak hit, but you can't fail. So that makes sense to me, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it. So we picked the troublesome. So it's as we're filling things in, right, we can fill in, I think on troublesome, which is the easiest one, you fill in, I think every success you fill in 3 boxes, right? So we say, okay, I think we also decided that this information that we got with the village, knowing kind of where we had to go and all these things, kind of filled in some progress. So that's how I filled this in. Then we went on the journey. And the first journey roll I rolled was a strong hit. So I didn't have the journey because our sheets don't have the journey. I could have used one of these, but one of the other, the player who was guiding us kept track of the journey one. So the first one was a strong hit. I think we made progress. There are a couple of options you have. He'd also print out some nice, I guess they have some kind of cheat sheet. It's not one sheet, but a little cheat sheet thing that has basically the basics with the kind of, with the rule adjudication stuff in there. So you go and, okay, so you're on strong hit. I think let me see if I can find it here really quick. If you go on the journey, is it an adventure move? Not face danger. Hold on a minute. Undertake a journey. Yeah, so if I zoom in, let me do this on one page. Okay, so I can zoom in. Okay. Whoops. So undertake a journey. All right, you get 3 progress per waypoint. So we're rolling. I got that. Okay, bam. So we get to waypoint. We get a 3 progress. And then we do that. So, all right, so strong hit. The waypoint I think we picked was a stone circle. And there actually was something else we picked. I don't remember if we looked. We might have done. Okay, let me see if I have it. So first of all, we did the undertake a journey. We got a strong hit. And we decided to mark progress and make good use of our resources, basically not using supply. And here is, hold on, Ian says, maybe your class determines what kind of narrative you can change. I mean, that'd be interesting, but there's no classes. So that would be kind of an interesting wrinkle. But then again, you also have to think about, Ian, you might be playing with one character, so it probably doesn't work. The experienced player had some ideas for doing sort of the spotlight sharing type stuff, which I'll cover at the end of this segment. And this is just some of that Jamaica Agua Fresca for the working man. Okay, so we went with strong. We decided not to lose supply, so we just kind of marked progress, right? Make good use of your resources, mark progress. And this is another interesting part, because there were some of us that were just like, great, we're moving. Other folks were like, ooh, how did you make good, like, what resources did you make good use of? And this is, again, it comes down to a stylistic thing. Okay, if you're really into the narrative building part of it, then yeah, you might want to have a scene or a montage or something that talks about the good use of resources. Like, what does that mean, good use of resources? Like, what resources did we use? And then there are other of us who were thinking like, well, it really just means that we didn't, the other option is you use resources and then you use enough to lose the supply, whereas we used enough we were able to be efficient enough that we didn't lose the supply, and that we didn't necessarily we didn't have any inspiration for that. And we kind of wanted to move on. And this, again, it's a style thing, right? Some folks are going to be like, no, I want to stop and make this a moment. And sometimes like, I want to pass over that moment. And that's another thing we're just going to have to find a balance with your table and who you're playing with to know, okay, I would probably just leave it up to the person. In this case, I didn't have anything specific to do or to say. So maybe just let it go. Whereas if you make the roll and you want to have a moment, there's probably different ways to do that. Or you just, they ask the question. So we just kind of, we talked about it a little bit, but, it's like, okay, we didn't find anything. But what was more interesting was I think we ended up using the Oracle, and we ended up with, I think we were at a mystic space, right? Yeah, we journeyed. Let me see, I got my notes here. Yeah, so we ended up in a mystic spot, which we just said, it's a stone circle, mystic space, stone circle. It ended up being a fairy circle because we had another little scene. Because I think it's on this next. We had a gather information, which we had a strong hit, and we saw people coming down the path, coming towards our village, and we heard them. They were not coming from the village that we were going to, but from another village. Maybe the villages aren't as scarce in this particular neck of the woods as in the Ironlands as a whole. In any case, we overhear them, and they're saying that they got a similar vision to what we got from the Iron Pillar, but theirs said that our village had done the destroying. In which case, we stepped out and we're like, "Hey, that's not true. Like, you go check out our village and you'll see it's been destroyed, and we're here to find out what's going on and whatever." So we had that little scene. It's like, great. Then we went to make another journey roll. Now, my first journey roll, that strong hit, that was by far the best roll I had all night. It was all downhill from there, including this one, which was I rolled 100. And of course, I did not get 10 on the action die plus my wits, it would have been impossible anyway, because rolling 100, basically 0 on both dice, 10s. My wits was 3, it was my strongest stat, but even if I rolled a 6, I could have only gotten a 9. So we were in miss with a twist. So when you get matching numbers on the D10s, it's like a twist. And then, of course, if you miss, it's kind of like a bad twist. So we ended up, and one of the players like, ooh, it was a fairy circle, and now we're trapped. That we entered kind of this enchanted fairy space, and we're stuck there. And I think we ended up rolling on the Oracle die again to say, okay, debate. So then they're like, hey, you know what we got to do? We got to convince the fairy, this fairy person to let us go. And this is where, again, style-wise things come in, right? Because they kind of put this scene in there, and it was fine, but they had a very specific version of fairies. It was kind of more not Galadriel, but more the brownies from Willow, right? The diminutive, mischievous, that kind of fairy. That I don't even know if it's really part of the Ironlands world. Not that really matters, but then like that just became a thing. Like, bam, we're in this kind of thing, right? And it's fine, but someone else might be like, that's not, it comes out right. It's like, okay, you've kind of made this kind of world building chunk, and we all went with it, but I could see it in different circumstances where it's like, does everyone want to go? Is that the way everyone wants to go, tonally and everything else? And I think you can feel, especially when you're playing with someone who is kind of quick and who is sort of feeling it a little bit more, right? You can end up, they can end up kind of pushing not just the narrative, but kind of the whole world in a direction that maybe you don't like, maybe you don't want to go, which is another reason why to go like, hey, baby steps and let's talk about it kind of thing, or at least be on the same page tonally and everything. It wasn't a problem for us, but these are things I look at and like, that could be a problem if people had kind of very different versions in their heads of this world that's building, and someone just kind of leaped in and just sort of set it in concrete and said, bam. Now, clearly we could have just said like, that's just this one thing, and that's not what all things are about, right? There are different ways you could kind of retcon, if you will, but still, that's just, something to kind of be aware of. So, okay, we're trapped in this fairy circle. We got to convince this fairy to leave. And somebody brought up the time dilation from fairy, because, you have stories of you end up in fairyland, or you eat the food, or you do something, and who knows how long you're gone. And somebody said, like, what if we were gone a year? And we kind of laughed. But then someone said, like, let's roll a die. If we roll a 1 on the die, it's basically no time dilation. If we roll a 2, it's minutes, I think 3 days, 4 months, or 4 weeks, 5 months, 6 years, something like that. Like basically from like minutes, either nothing, minutes to years. Guess what we rolled when that faithful D6 was rolled? We rolled a year. So, and we were all enjoying this. This is kind of the thing that I think was kind of the strength, though I hate to hesitate to say it's the strength of Ironsworn, because really you could get this with any kind of Oracle GM emulator kind of system, but whatever, we're playing Ironsworn, so it's so like we're stuck in there a whole year, but we don't know yet that we're stuck a whole year. So we come out and we're thinking like, okay, we don't know, because we come out, it's the same time of year, everything kind of looking about the same, but a year has passed, which just in some ways just flips everything around, because now we've gone from this thing at our village just happened to it happened a year ago. And like, what is everything, when we get to this other village, what's everything looking like? Well, we said, like, let's wait till we get to the village. Like, even that's where I was kind of running ahead, like, man, what is it going to look like? We get to the other village where we're coming to avenge something that happened a year ago. And who even knows, what all the stuff that's happened in that year, right? We have no idea. But they're like, well, let's just get there first. Like, okay, so I roll another journey die. Now, we had said, and here's where I think, not necessarily it's an issue, though I think it could be, but it's this kind of mind, you really have to get your mind into it. You're going on a journey, you're filling in these boxes, right? To the best chance of you successfully completing the journey is to fill in all the boxes. That way you're guaranteed to get at least some kind of mixed success. But there's the problem of that we created for ourselves, but I feel like it's a problem that might come up with other people, is we kind of said that, hey, this other village is about a day away. So then your brain, you're thinking, well, how many journeys is it to go a day? Because I think in our brain, certainly in mine, was like one journey roll a day kind of made sense. Like, yeah, like we roll and that's kind of 1 day's travel, and we roll and that's another day's travel. So doesn't it kind of make sense at the end of this second journey phase, we'll be at the village, right? But that's not really what the game wants. I don't think the game really wants you to even think in terms of distance, because it doesn't necessarily, like, you're going these waypoints, but it's, I think, and I think the fact is that we're not playing like the One Ring, and their travel system has that point-to-point travel system, but you map it out ahead of time, and and so you have this sense of how you're moving along the trail. I think that for Ironsworn, it doesn't have that. I don't think it has that kind of system in there, unless I don't think I really got to it, but you just kind of, it's all very abstracted in these journey rolls, but you don't get we sort of were saying, we were making these statements in our brain about how much a journey roll is, but there is not a number, because it can end whenever you want it to end. And by us saying that 2 journey rolls is 2 days is basically a day of travel, because we traveled, and then we had a thing, and then kind of like, or day and a half or whatever it ended up being, we kind of got ourselves to this section where it's like we're at, and I talked about this as a potential pitfall in the stream, so I kind of nailed it for myself. Maybe I should have been thinking about it ahead and dissuaded us from putting hard numbers on it, but I wasn't thinking about it. We're kind of at the village, but we're not at the village yet. Like we can't be at the village till we decide to whatever the thing is, reach the destination, which is a move. And the problem is that when you're doing the move, you're doing this thing with the progress. And we, so we're kind of like trying to think about like, well, like what are we doing? But again, it's not going to really matter too much. It didn't matter for very long, because I got another big miss. So they gave me the dice again and said, hey, you're the guy. Oh, so no, actually that's kind of wrong. So we did like one other travel, and we got to a camp. We determined that we got to a campsite that we'd used before. So I think we ended up with 6 in the travel. We got to the campsite we used before, and this is where and I think I said like, oh yeah, this, because this is where one of the players again said like, ooh, what does it look like when you're using your resources well? And I said, well, maybe it's that we get to this campsite and it's somewhere I was a hunter. I was traveling around the woods a lot, and I would put little caches of maybe things there, the food and stuff, that maybe I'm coming and I'm on the hunt. I can come and have a place to rest that's relatively safe, and I can eat something. And so then we had this little moment of, but what if we get there? But it's been a year. We don't know it's been a year, but it's been a year since we got there. So I have these foodstuffs, and it's all like rotted or dried. It's like, wait, I left this thing here in my mind a couple of days ago, and it's all, it's been there a year, right? So it's like when he's like, okay, it's this clue for us. Like, oh, something's not right. I don't know. Is it magic? Is it, whatever it is? Like, I don't know, but something's not right. So that was kind of a neat moment of like, hey, what's going on here? We don't know yet. All right. But then then we're thinking, okay, so now travel roll number 3. So right now I had one excellent roll. I think I had, or maybe I had 2 good rolls, but here's my 3rd travel roll, another complete, another miss. So here I've got and so we decided to reach the destination moves. We traveled twice, and our minds were like, I think we're there. I think we were kind of like, we want to kind of get, I think we're kind of interested in the story. I think we wanted to kind of get there, right? So we're like, okay, we're there. We said it was a day, and we're trying to suss this out in our brains. How many more, and I think it's a problem with us, but I think also just the way the system's set up is like, well, what is a journey? What does undertaking the journey mean? It doesn't have a real physical meaning, or it's elastic. It could mean a lot. It could mean a little. It really no, because you decide when to end the journey, right? There's not a set of 2 of these, and you reach your destination. So roll. It's like, no, you can take as many as you want and do that, or as few as you want. And we decided, like, we got 6. I think we're just going to call it here, because our brains are just struggling with like what is that there's that philosophical kind of math problem with the arrow that never hits the target, right? Each day, you fire the arrow, and every second it moves half the distance to its target, which means at first it's leaping forward, but then it's slowing and never reaching the target, because it's always cutting the distance in half. And that distance is getting, less and less, but it's never reaching 0. So it's like, and like, I think we kind of felt that a little bit like, okay, we're going to get there. We're going to take our chances with 6. And we know our chances are not good, because I think it's basically like rolling rolling the opposition, rolling with advantage, essentially, at least to get a strong hit. And we got a big miss. So when you reach your destination on a miss, and I'll just read here from the book, it says you have gone hopelessly astray, your objective is lost to you, or you were misled by your destination. If your journey continues, we could clear out all but 1 progress and raise the rank by 1, which we didn't want to do. We didn't want to like, oh, got to start over. That was like, nope. So we just decided that, you know what? Our objective is lost. It's lost, but we're coming to a village. So the village is lost. And we're like, so it sounds like, oh my gosh, we're doing things like, well, what are we going to do? But it ended up being, I think, a really cool moment, because we decided, okay, the village is lost. It's been obliterated, or no, not even obliterated like our village. It's just gone. Like we had decided when we were coming up somewhere during this process, we were thinking about what is the name of this village, and we rolled, I think, randomly for a name. We got Stone Tower, and I think it was my thing, which I will feel proud of, that they had made a stone version of the iron pillars, and that that was what they venerated. They venerate the iron pillars, and they made their own kind of big one, and replica is this kind of stone tower, and that's the name for the town. Awesome. So we get there, and the town is just gone. It's been wiped off the face. There's still open field. It's not covered by trees, and it's only been a year, so it wouldn't get super covered anyway. But basically, it's all open, and the stone tower is still there. But everything else about the village is just gone. And there's an iron pillar. Another iron pillar is there, and that was a really cool moment. And I think that speaks to what you can do with oracles, and what I like about randomization and stuff. Like, yeah, we you could kind of look at it and get frustrated and think like, you know what, we did this stuff and we get there and really our objectives just lost. I mean, and we weren't going for, if it's a person, you could make a case of, okay, that person's lost, or they died, or they disappeared, or we were trying to get a necklace and the necklace is lost. But a whole village, like, we could have chosen hopelessly astray, or some other thing, but we chose this other one. We kind of took I think our group was kind of into taking the nuclear options on things, and which was kind of funny. And we were kind of going a lot of times for these kind of darker angles, and yeah, we kind of took the nuclear option, said it's just gone. But it was really cool, because there is this big mystery of these iron pillars, which we've known as part of the Ironlands. They're bouncing around, but they've never done anything bad before. They just go, oh, it's here and it's gone, whatever. But now bad things are happening, and clearly they're tied to these iron pillars. So we got that moment. And then the last thing we did was I think one of the characters decided to go to to gather information. They were going to go inside the stone tower, that replica kind of iron pillar, but bigger. And we had decided it's hollow. They may have used it as a temple or something, a shrine, something like that, and rolled a miss. And so on a miss, for when you're gathering information, you either unearth a dire threat or an unwelcome truth that undermines your quest. So we went with the dire threat because we were thinking it's getting to be the end of the night. I wanted to see how the combat worked. And feel like, let's fight something. Let's fight something. And we ended up picking an epic opponent, which was an Iron Revenant, I think it's called. Iron Revenant. Is it in this book? Do we have did they put creatures in the book? Maybe critters are somewhere else. I don't know. I didn't look at the stat block. The player who was guiding it, who had the hard. Oh, here it is. Wait, let me see if it's here. Oh no, that's our truth, not the actual things. Let's see. Just gonna look down here. I don't know. Okay, I guess. Yeah, I don't know where he got the iron. It might be a different book. I'm not sure. Anyway, we got the iron. So we got this Iron Revenant. And it's made up of like different armor bits that have come together. It's super tough. And here's where another thing where it was, there's a little bit where I'm fighting against my D&D-isms. So when you're doing these combat moves, let me get back to the combat moves. So you're getting these combat moves, and we're all kind of new to it for the most part, right? Even the person who's guiding us, I think, is fairly new as well. And I think they'd read it. They're more, they kind of knew the system better on paper than most of us, right? But not necessarily through playing it a bunch. So, okay. So you enter, there's this enter the fray. We decided our foe was I think we just went straight up epic. And then what did we do? I think I don't remember if we did the step. Maybe I missed it. Oh, I think we did this. So, okay, a couple of us had to enter the fray. So this is where I'd had another really poor roll where I wanted to use my Hawk Hawk companion to basically, I think it was called gain an advantage, where I could just get something a little extra to kind of, so I thought, let me use that to try to get, because we're fighting something epic. I wanted all the kind of, let me get as many, if I can get an advantage into an advantageous spot to get a little bit better, let me do that, right? But I failed. And so I had to pick one of the, if we go to, let's see, not endure harm. I think I had to pick was it face a setback? No. I had to pick one of these. I don't remember which one it is now. In any case, it basically was, I could pick, harm, and I thought, like, this is going to be a tough spot, so I don't want to start taking damage before I've even done anything. So I ended up picking the delay, which ended up being that I was kind of out of it for the whole fight, but the fight didn't last very long. And this is where I was getting kind of confused. I think my D&D-isms, my reflexive kind of falling into D&D patterns was not helping for me. But I was just kind of like, I just came saying, like, I think I just said a few times, like, I don't understand how initiatives work. Somebody help me. What is this? What does initiative mean? Because so we won the initiative. The first character or one of the players' characters they won the initiative. They did that and they rolled. They got some hits and they actually took off some. We actually did a bit of damage to this thing. Like it says, and like, okay. And then somebody else, another player's like, I enter the fray. Okay, great. And this is like using the strike, right? So you have initiative. And I'm kind of reading this for the first time, but sort of they were explaining it, but this is what I'm reading it. So because you won the initiative and you're attacking close quarters, which one was, okay, so you roll that. And we were getting some lucky rolls now. Not me, but our party as a whole getting some lucky rolls. So, okay, bam. They got the strong hit. They inflicted some extra damage, and they keep the initiative. This is where this thing with initiative, it's like, and I don't know if initiative, I think I was told that initiative is basically on a per combatant level. So it's like, okay, this character has initiative. Then another character entered the fray, and they also had initiative.
And then it felt like to me that we were just able to just ping pong this thing with hits, and it wasn't doing anything, or it wasn't responding because it never got initiative back. And then I think we decided to, okay, so here's the turn of tide. So I think whoever has the initiative just keeps going. That seems to be what I'm gathering from this. That you keep the initiative, you're still going. So you're hitting, you keep the initiative, you're hitting. And that was the balancing factor here, I guess, is that you're making these moves, and presumably at some point you're going to lose that strong hit. So you're not going to be able to keep the initiative, and then the creature can go, and then it can go. It seems like if that's the way it's intended, which I'm not certain it is, but that's kind of how we played it, and we just didn't lose initiative over the course of the battle, that you're going to have kind of swingy fights where you could end up with a creature, and the creature could just bulldoze you because it has initiative, and it just keeps initiative and just plows into you and you're through, or vice versa, right? You get initiative, and of course it can be more balanced where you're going back and forth. But I kept kind of waiting for, like, well, we've all hit the thing. Does the thing not get to hit us back? Is that not how this works here? But I'm thinking, in the sort of simulationist combat and not in this more narrative style. And I don't know. It's looking at this, it looks like we were kind of getting it mostly right, though I'm not completely certain. I have to read through it a bit. But we ended up getting, I think, 5 or 6 on it. And I think 5.5, but you don't count the halves, right? So we decided, like, we're at the end of the sessions. We're like, like, we're going to end the fight. And whether we actually ended the fight, we ended up giving ourselves a weak hit. But it's a little bit controversial because we weren't sure whether we could add a +1 because of something or not. But we decided, like, we'll just gonna take the weak hit. So I think on a weak hit, the foe is surrenders, disappears. I think we just, it came apart. It was overcome, whatever, momentarily. And I think we took as what did we take? Was it an objective fall? I think maybe an objective falls out of reach. In that, with the thing gone, it was the only sort of clue that we had. We're kind of square one. So we kind of ended the session of, our initial vow of we're gonna figure out who took the village, who basically sacked our village, and the village that we thought did it is gone. And the one thing that could have maybe given us a clue, if we could have subdued it enough to ask it questions. I don't know if those revenants can answer questions, but we could have made that up as we're going. In any case, that's gone too. So we're at this, what used to be a village, but now it's just an open field. And we don't have any leads. So I think that was a really, you think of the story of the adventure that we made, it's really good. I think that was really, I thought it was well done. I think how we got there was a little bit clunky in spots. And I think some of that clunkiness, maybe most of it, maybe all of it, depending how you feel, is just from the fact that we're all inexpert with a new system and how it works. I think some of it is it's definitely a different mindset. And I know that I'm going to struggle with it, at least if I keep playing. If I get a chance to play it more, maybe I'll get more comfortable in it. But, I'm kind of fighting upstream against, 40 years of doing things in kind of the D&D kind of world, and moving to some of these narrative ways. There's definitely going to be some times where I have to kind of say, like, okay, initiative here does not mean what initiative I'm used to, or, we shouldn't really think about distances, and we really just need to think in terms of, I think what would help with some of that stuff is having all the boxes for tracking stuff in the middle of us. So we're doing that, because if we looked at that and said, because we're thinking about that an action has a certain physical representation, or that the actions represent something physical, and they kind of don't, or it's not clear. It's fuzzy. It's quantum. Because if you rolled, let's say we rolled one travel, we decide we're going to roll one travel roll, and we roll, and we get a strong hit, right? So we mark down 3, and we just decide, like, what the heck, reach our destination and re-roll a 1 and a 2 on the D10s. That would mean that one travel roll represented however much travel it was for us to get from A to B. And then if we had, but we could do that same travel over again and decide we're gonna do at least 3 or 4 journey rolls essentially ends up being the same distance, but we max out to 10 so that we don't have any chance of missing, right? But it's the same distance kind of thing. That kind of thing, it's you're going to have to wrap your mind around that a little bit. Like, how does that mean for you that, okay, this journey roll has no set distance to it? It's kind of, in the end of the day, it's just a sort of a very abstracted making progress kind of thing, but not distance. And we made the mistake in terms of the system by trying to think of it in terms of how much distance did we put in there, when maybe what we should have done is looked at the progress and kind of decided sort of how risky we were, and then sort of not thought about it so much in terms of you were walking for hours. Like, oh, we're walking, we reached this milestone, which is finding the stone circle. Then we do this stuff. And then it's really kind of at the end of the day, when you've done everything, then maybe you determine how many days it is. I'd have to get me and my brain, I'm thinking what is that kind of, what does it mean for the world? But the thing is, that's just not kind of the way the world works. It's not the way the system works. Is that you shouldn't really be caring. It doesn't want you to care about that. It doesn't really want you to be thinking about what is that. It doesn't want you to be thinking about that. At least not when you're going through it. At the end of it, you could say like it was a day away, or maybe you say it's a day away. That's why we're doing it as a. Which I think how we did, it's like, oh, it's a day away, so it's troublesome. But that troublesome still might mean you're doing 4 or 5 journey rolls. So you're kind of establishing it. It's an interesting way of doing it. I totally haven't wrapped my brain around. I don't know that I love that part of it. It also can be very swingy, because it's essentially what you're doing with the 2 10-sided dice and the 6-sided die is the 10-sided dice are basically you're setting a DC. You're setting not only the difficulty, but also the spread between failure and mixed success. Because if you get a 10 and a 2, you're very likely, almost guaranteed. If you get a 2 and a 10, you're guaranteed a weak hit, because whatever of your attributes, or whatever they call attributes here, you're using, the lowest they can be is 1. Well, I guess if you roll a 1 and you get a 1, then you would get you would fail, because you have to actually exceed the 2 10-sided dice, not match them. So whatever, but you're pretty well. If I'm running in the wilderness, I'm rolling the journey die, I have 3 wits. Anything less than a 4 on the one of those D10s means we're guaranteed a mixed success. Okay, but that spread can change and those numbers can change, and it can be very swingy, and it doesn't, the system does not care about you're in the same place. So imagine we're doing 2 gather information rolls in a glade. And one player says, I'm going to check out the west side of the glade. I'm going to check out the east side of the glade. So great, we go to different sides of this glade. But one of us gets really rolls really low on those 2 D10s. So their challenge is inconsequential. Strong hit. Hooray. I come to the other side of the glade, same glade, and I roll 100, 2 10s. So my challenge essentially is impossible. So I miss. Now you can come up with reasons why, but there's a little bit like it can lead to, if you're not careful, but it can feel really just capricious as to whether it's like, we're just on 2 sides of a glade. I mean, you could be looking at 2 sides of a table. Here's a desk. You look in this drawer, I'll look in this drawer. Great, gather information. This drawer is got some kind of horrible whatever attached. This drawer is just, it doesn't necessarily, cohering these 2 things together can be challenging a little bit, depending on how you want to do it. And I was thinking one thing I was thinking about, maybe and this is what I was thinking about a little bit on the subway ride home, and I was thinking about it this morning a little bit. Like, what if you had 1 die that you could set for the area? Like, okay, we're entering this woods, so I'm going to roll a die, or if there's a set number, and say that die is whatever, and then the other die becomes I would just roll it, and this way you kind of can see ahead of time. If I roll a 3 or it's a 3, then that gives me a much better idea of what's going on. Then it kind of tells you something about you understand something about the nature of the world before you're into it, because that's something the system with this random DC for every roll and everybody's like, if you're rolling, and I don't know if they have some, imagine we're climbing ropes. We're climbing up a rope. And so we're each having to make a climb. I don't know whether we would have one set of D10s and I'll roll against it, which would maybe be my preference. But if we're doing it just the way the system seems to suggest, which we're rolling our own DCs, and some person get really low DC, some person get really high DC, but we're actually doing the same thing, or we're walking across a rope bridge or something like it. There's just, and of course you can create fiction around like, no, a sudden huge gust of wind came or swinging it. But it can just be a little bit like, oh my gosh, right? Like, what is the world like if we can't really figure out, is this cliff, is it totally smooth? Like it's an 8 and 9, so it's really hard to climb. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. Or is it a 3 and a 4, which means it's got lots of handholds? Like, which one is it? Like you can't really say mechanically, because the system's generating them fluidly. I don't know if I love that, and I was wondering about, what if you set one die to give you some idea of the world, and then another die gets to be random as you're doing it, and it's like one is sort of the nature of the world, which is here 4, let's say, and then another die is like circumstances in the moment, blah blah blah, which is then random. And I don't know if that would totally do it. It might make it too easy to get weak hits, but it might be something I'm looking at. I think the game, one of the things that the game's doing, so one of the players, their feedback was that it's like it quickly becomes a game of tangents. So we start off on we thought was a simple quest, and suddenly all this stuff's happening and we're off doing all these side things. And I think that's intentional. I think that's something that's part of what the game, and this is why I think it might be where I think mechanically the benefit of the random DCs all the time, and the way that you can get, you can get to a point where you have a 10% chance of essentially only being able to get a mixed success, which means you're going to insert something new and potentially bad is going to enter the fray regardless, because it's always on a 10. You can only match a 10, I think. Well, like, yeah, you can never match a 10 if you're rolling a 6-sided die, because your highest you can get is 3. Maybe, I don't know if you can get more in your attributes. So the only highest you can roll is basically a 9. And momentum was another one that's unclear to me, so I don't remember if you could add momentum to it or not to make it. And if you're doing progress, you can match a 10, but you can't get more than 10 progress. So if you match a 10, you lose to it. So you just, so there's a 10% chance that a quest is never going to be able to get, or whatever you're doing is going to end up on a weak hit. But what this means is you're going to be generating new stuff. And I think that's something the system wants to do. The system wants to keep generating new complications, new things you need to do, new things entering the mix. So that you can't just, or it'd be difficult, or you have to be really lucky to just go through a quest, a vow, and not have something new show up. So I think that part is really valid and valuable, and that's what they're trying to do. Is there another way they could do it? I'm not sure. Am I in love with this? Like, I think it's really easy, and especially playing solo, I think having all these boxes and things is really handy. I think we did run into, which is what I had a little trouble with when we were running through it, was in the combat of how many ticks we're putting in to fill out these boxes. I kind of think there's an easier way to do it, which is take the big boxes and just put an X in there and say fill in one segment or pie piece or something like that. So that's, and just make all those, say, hey, if you're doing this, you fill in all the boxes, otherwise fill in each wedge kind of dealio, or mini box. I think there's maybe a cleaner way to do it, because it's doing it became a little bit like, okay, how many hits? Okay, what are we at? Oh, because there was some disagreement of like, were we at 5.5 or were we at 4.5, or like how many we were. And I think there's maybe a cleaner way, just in terms of the presentation of the boxes, to make that a little bit easier, I think. But it works. It works fine. I think supply worked pretty well. You got to kind of look at it again super abstractly, because I was thinking like, hey, does every travel thing we use supply? Like, I'm thinking kind of D&D hex crawling. Like, okay, you traveled for a day, so or whatever, so subtract supply. But nope, that's pretty much only for when you hit those certain results. Let's say you can do something, lose the supply, or you take that particular harm. You really will only lose supply when you want to. But obviously, if you have no supply to lose, then that takes that option off the board. But it's just a different way of looking at supply. We didn't end up having to do much with health or spirit. I didn't really gain any momentum. And one of the other players got a bunch of momentum, but it wasn't clear. I don't remember how I think they definitely spent it in the combat, but I don't remember what they did. And to me, I didn't quite I wasn't on top of the transactions with the momentum, so I didn't quite catch what exactly was going on or how that worked. But they did that. So I liked it. Some stuff is just new to me. Approaches of doing things is new to me. Some stuff I thought was a little bit. Really all of it comes down to you have to get in this kind of different mindset. Is it a mindset of that I want to be in all the time? I don't know. I kind of think it works to me anyway. I think I thought our group did well with the kind of group cohesion and getting along and being on the same, not necessarily being on the same page, but just being, open and accepting of other people's ideas and other people's things. I think it works. I think to me, I look at it, maybe the optimal group's a bit smaller than ours, maybe 2, or if you're going to play with multiple people, maybe 2 or 3, 2 plus a GM, or maybe 2 plus a guide kind of thing. I think it might work better. I think as a solo game, I can see why. Well, I do feel like, I guess the rules, the mechanics give you this opening to narrate. They'll say like, hey, envision what happens. But I was also thinking like, you could do that with any game. I don't know, any game you could be, if you're playing BX solo, it's like you get to a place, envision what it is. I don't know. I kind of think you could take, and this is where I think systems like Mythic come in and put it on top of many systems, and just anywhere where normally a GM would describe to you, you could write to yourself, envision what's in, and it probably would work pretty well. The other thing that though was interesting, not necessarily good or bad, but it just struck me as a little bit odd, or not odd's not right, maybe dissonant. Okay. So a lot of stuff here with these moves, right? Very Powered by the Apocalypse styled moves, heavily influenced, I would guess, by Powered by the Apocalypse, is they're very kind of open-ended, right? The journeys, it's very abstract. Like how, when you undertake a journey, distance is kind of variable, length of time, it doesn't really, you could narrate whatever, all that stuff's open. But then you get to your powers. I think I have, you get to your, see if I can open this up. You get to your powers here, and these these kind of ability things are very specific. And fortunately, this picture is not, I down-resed it to load up. So it's hard to see in here, but your hawk. So I took, when you take some of these, they have a box. They give you options. Where one is filled, that's the one that's your first one. So you take on Slayer, and you get this first power, ability, skill, whatever you want to call it. And then when you can spend experience at later points to fill in further circles to get more options if you want. So I have I have Path, Slayer. And since it's circled, this one's filled in by default. I get this ability, which is when you gather information by tracking a beast or horror, or when you secure an advantage by readying yourself or fight against them, add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. This is what I was trying to do. I was trying to secure an advantage, I think, when I got lost. Or because I wasn't using my hawk, I was using Slayer, and I missed. Right? This seems to be very specific in that it's mentioning specific moves. Right? You gather information. You secure an advantage. You get this very specific bonuses. And to me, it's a little bit at odds with how loosey-goosey the rest of things are, especially when I think that kind of it reminds me very much of kind of a fourth edition draw steel kind of, your power card. Here's your power card, right? Which is fine. But, I always thought with Powered by the Apocalypse, and this is the same with things in D&D, right? You should be saying what you're doing, not saying what move you're making. So I should not be saying I gather information. I should be saying what I do, and if what I do is gathering information when I do that. But here you're in a little bit of a weird spot because you want to trigger the move, because the move is where your ability comes in. So whereas in other advice might be saying, no, you don't say you're going to go gather information. You say, I'm going to check tracks, or I'm going to do something. But here it's asking you specifically to think in terms of the move. For a solo game, maybe it works. It's, it's fine. I mean, it's fine anyway, but it's just interesting because it's almost like you're kind of pulled in a couple different directions. Where on the one hand, you want to be in the fiction, and then the fiction leads to the move. But here, when I'm trying to use an ability, I'm starting with the move I want to make, and I'm leaning to the fiction, right? Because I think there's advice in the book about fiction to move to fiction as kind of the game loop. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's here somewhere. There's a game loop. I know we saw it. Is it here? I don't know where it was. There is a game loop thing somewhere. Where? I don't know. Oh, pay the price. That's what I tend to do. Yeah, I had to pay the price. Where's that? I don't know where the loop is. Somewhere there's a game loop where it does give you that bit, which I really liked as a thing. But now I don't know where it is. If I put loop in here, will it show up? No matches were found. Huh. I don't know. I don't know where it is. Okay. So in any event, so you start off with kind of one hand, you want to start fiction first and then go into your move and then back to the fiction. But then when you're using your character traits, whatever you want to call it, then you have to go move fiction, move into the fiction sort of thing. I don't know if there's, and look, there may not be a way around it unless you're going to go kind of really narrative and not put mechanics in there and not talk about moves. I might put it this way. I mean, this might work better with some things than others. Like if you're, and just talk about the fictional part, like, hey, if you're doing these things, then you get a little bit of a bonus to your act. Like if, like even with the hawk, like if your hawk is aiding you with one of these actions, then do the thing and you get a little bonus. But, I don't know if that would really work, but it's just an interesting kind of dealing. All right. I know we're going long, but I'm okay with that today. Let me switch gears now. So that was, I don't think I have anything left to say about Ironsworn. I definitely will play it again. There's definitely some things I'm intrigued about. I don't know that ultimately I'm like, yeah, this is the game for me. I need to play more. I feel like there's always lessons you kind of learn and things you can sort of adapt. I can see why people like it. I think you could probably use, if you like Ironsworn's oracles, I think you could probably adapt them to some other game if you want to. If you're in love with the Ironsworn system, that's great. I think the way it does the tracking, I think especially kind of solo, it's great. I think in a group, I would probably put something in the middle of the table. Like this is where I think you could print out a board or just use blocks or something to say, okay, here's what we're doing. We're doing travel in here, and this way everyone can visualize it easily and sort of see your progress. Because really, we were looking at our physical progress in our brains as we're actually moving through a landscape, whereas really we want to be looking as your sort of metaphysical progress, the journey behind the journey, the meta journey, and that we really shouldn't be worrying about physical distances until we've actually gotten to that part where like, yes, we figured out we've arrived, and for someone like me, that takes some altering of assumptions that's difficult. Okay, so switching gears now. I went and downloaded the Daggerheart SRD the other day. People have been talking, you get these things with these games, like, the games that come out, right? So Draw Steel and Daggerheart, and you get people saying, oh my gosh, I love this thing, and in this game, and it's amazing. I feel like it seems ancient now, but Shadow Dark had the same thing. Oh, real-time torches. Oh, these things it's doing are amazing. So you get, the game comes out. People who fall in love with it start evangelizing these things they really like about it, putting it up, for Shadow Dark. It was some of this real-time tools. I mean, there's other things too, but I think that when I think of Shadow Dark, I think of that part of it. People saying, oh, the real-time, whatever. Okay. Draw Steel, I know the no missing, and okay, or the way that your powers amp up over the course of a battle. Instead of having resource drain, they flipped it around. You're like, no, the longer the battles go on, the more you get. So you're building up, kind of, which is, to me, is very much this kind of anime style as you're trying to reach or playing Street Fighter or something where you have to reach your mega, your mega power. You don't have that at the beginning. You have to work your way up to it, or like a wrestling match almost, where you don't get to Hulk up at the beginning of the match. You got to Hulk up at the end of the match. You have to earn that. Okay, that's kind of, that's a Draw Steel thing. Well, one of the things I heard about Daggerheart was this campaign frame. Oh, campaign frames. I love the campaign frames. So I want to look at the campaign frame. Now, I saw one posted on Reddit, and it was 10 pages long. And I thought, like, holy moly, that's too much. Because my understanding, and we're gonna read in a minute, but my understanding from what I've been hearing was that the campaign frame is this thing you do as kind of your campaign pitch. Like, hey, I got a game or I got a setting. I want to run Daggerheart, and there's a setting I like. So I'm going to write up this campaign frame that'll give everybody kind of a summary of what's going on. And the campaign frame gives you a structure. So a lot of people struggle with, well, what do I share if I'm trying to pitch somebody a campaign? Like, what kind of stuff do I share? I don't know if I've made videos on it. I've definitely talked about it before. Certainly on forums, people talked about it. Like, okay, you could do this, that, and the other. And this idea of the campaign frame is just their way of structuring the information that you might hand out to players, prospective players, to say, here's what I'm kind of pitching you. Right? Seems like a cool idea, so I want to read it. But then I saw the one and I still want to read it, but I saw on Reddit someone posting one, and they'd done it on Home Brewery, that site where it does all the formatting and stuff. So I don't know if it could have been done more briefly, but it was a 10-page long document. And I thought, holy cow, for a game that you're not sure that people are going to join, it's like your pitch. Like, I feel like 10 pages is way too long. But I didn't know whether it's something that they took upon themselves or whether it was just kind of something that just is the way campaign frames are. So I thought, like, let's just look at campaign frames. Now, I don't have the Daggerheart rulebook, but it is part of their SRD. So I loaded up the SRD and I thought we could take a look. So I'm on page, if you want to follow along, I'm on page 113 of the Daggerheart SRD, where they're talking about campaign frames. So, campaign frames. A campaign frame provides inspiration, tools, and mechanics to support a particular type of story at the table. Every campaign frame has a complexity rating that indicates how much its mechanics deviate from or expand upon the Daggerheart core rule set. Each campaign frame includes the following sections: a pitch to present to players, suggestions and guidance on tone, feel, themes, and touchstones, an overview of the campaign's background, guidance for fitting communities, ancestries, and classes into the setting, principles for players and GMs to focus on during the campaign, unique setting distinctions, an inciting incident to launch the campaign, special mechanics to use during the campaign, and questions to consider during session 0. Okay, so the first thing I'm reading about this is, hey, Croco. First thing I'm getting from this is they don't say specifically that this is something you present to players before they're playing. Because I got, at least reading on Reddit, it seemed like people were saying, like, I'm going to go and create like 50 campaign frames and see which one works. And man, that just seems like a lot of work. I would definitely recommend, if you're thinking about, I want to pitch a game to my players, I'm going to write up a campaign frame for it, don't. And I don't mean because this is a bad structure for giving, this is more of a campaign Bible as opposed to something you hand to pitch somebody. It's a lot. I mean, it feels like a lot of work. Not necessarily a bad kind of work, but a lot of work. Start with the pitch, send the pitch. If you get the pitch, then the next thing you can do is write up the frame, hand everybody, or maybe the pitch and the tone, feel, themes, and touchstones kind of thing if you want to. Stop there until you get like a bunch of people saying like, I'm interested, and then next up do the rest. Because if you're writing these and they're taking up and you're sitting there and you're being thoughtful about them, which I think you'd want to be, and you're writing up 10 pages or more of material just for some folks to say, nah, read it for 30 seconds and go, nope. That's a bummer. I mean, you know, one of the whole challenges for GMs is being able to handle a kind of, you know, rejections of different sorts. And one of the things that makes it hard is because you've put so much work into stuff, and then having somebody kind of potentially flippantly go like, not interested. Right? It hurts. It hurts. You feel that you've done all this work and it's not getting, you know, rewarded, or it's not getting respected. And this is just, to me, if you write up a whole campaign frame just to hand to some people who are not invested already, you're just setting yourself up to be disappointed, I think, by people. Setting yourself to be disappointed by our fellow humans. But let's go. So I thought, you know, okay, this is just so this is just your things. There's a lot here. This complexity rating is interesting, indicating how much the mechanics deviate from core. That's kind of a really interesting thing to put. I don't know how you figured that out on a hard number. I don't know, was it a 1 to 5 scale? What's the difference between 3 and a 4 on the scale? I don't know, but I can appreciate, I think a lot of folks, we've seen this with D&D, it's certainly modern D&D and OSR and stuff, people don't care too much. People are much more open to like a whole bunch of homebrew, you know, house rule kind of like customizations. But I know with 5e, people get kind of touchy over, is it core or is it not core? You didn't tell me, or I wasn't whatever. So having some kind of number or gauge you can put and say, yeah, I'm deviating a bit then someone who just wants to do core Daggerheart could probably just say, yeah, I'm not. Okay, I'm not into that, right? I want to play. I mean, that would be me. Like the first time I played Daggerheart, I probably wouldn't want to play one that's deviating a huge amount from core, because I want to try Daggerheart kind of as it is, not house ruled up and down, right? So that would make sense. That would make sense to me. But I don't know how you figure out the numbers, but some kind of, yeah, I'm doing a lot or a little or none probably is good. Campaign pitch is good. I think having the tone, themes, touchdowns, that stuff is good. I think all this stuff individually is good. And I think in terms of looking at and saying, here's a framework, if you were wondering like what to put together as sort of your little campaign Bible to hand to people, I think it's good. But I think in terms of what you should have kind of from jump, like when you're just pitching, it's way too much. But let's see their pitch. Crocco says, seems like a setting overview for players. I think it's more than an overview. Well, let's see what theirs is. So here we have the Witherwild. This is their version. Or this is an example. Complexity rating 1, which I'm guessing means it's pretty much more or less Daggerheart core. So here's the pitch. Fanewick was once a place of great abundance and peace, dangerous to those unfamiliar with the land, but a cornucopia to those who respected its ways. When Haven invaded the wilds and forced the land into eternal spring, a dangerous bloom known as the Witherwild took hold and now threatens the lives of all who live there. In a Witherwild campaign, you'll play unlikely heroes from humble beginnings who are reckoning with their newfound duty to save Fanewick's people from dangerous corruption. Like that to me is your overview. And I think that's kind of all, at least for step 1 of am I interested in playing this campaign? That's almost all you need. But we do get tone and feel right here. Adventurous, dynamic, epic, heroic, thrilling, uncanny, whimsical. And then themes, cultural clash, ends justify the means, grief, people versus nature, transformation, change, survival, and then touchdowns, Princess Mononoke, Legend of Zelda, Dark Crystal, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. So I think between these, like, I would stop here. You do not need anything else as your first step of either taking this to a gaming group or a gaming store or posting it on an LFG, or online forum or Roll20 or wherever you're playing like that. I don't think you need any more. So then you get the overview, which is if your group decides to play this campaign, give your players the following information, right? Which is good, but I wish they would put a note in here of don't write this. Don't even bother writing the overview if you haven't gotten past this part. I almost feel like split this up into 2 things. This first one, which I think it's fair to have together because it does give you a good picture. And then this other stuff is like, hey, save it for kind of part 2. Anyway, so their overview for their campaign is Fanewick is a wild and untamed land, long avoided by outside forces. The woods are dark and twisting, filled with faint divinities, capital F, capital D, who perform small miracles and services for its inhabitants, but are just as likely to lure travelers off narrow paths to their ruin. Seemingly harmless expanses of field hide bogs that engulf entire armies, consuming heavy artillery as quickly as it can cross the border. This wilderness fosters hardy people who are bold enough to raise families where others have not, and strictly follow the unique rules that keep them safe. These wicklings remain insulated from their neighbors' wars until plague forced the people of Haven to desperate acts. Crocco says they feel like themes and vibes is not that useful because people interpret those differently. I think they're still useful. I mean, yes, people interpret everything kind of differently, but I think they're still useful. I think that Princess Mononoke, Legend of Zelda, I think you say that to most people, they'll get a pretty similar idea of what's going on. If you were to throw to people who know them, obviously, Princess Mononoke, Zelda, Dark Crystal, and Nausicaa, I think you'll tend to get more people who will be in agreement generally over what that means, which is all you're trying to do, right? You're not trying to nail down all the specifics, but I think you'll get somewhere, which is I think is why it's part of part 1. This is just to give you a real general, well, even the themes, cultural tone and feel, like this, adventurous, dynamic, epic, heroic. I mean, these are kind of generic. I think you could probably redo these, but I think the key ones probably, if I'm looking at this as a prospective player, the thing I'm looking at, okay, the whimsical and the maybe epic, heroic, or epic, heroic, but kind of whimsical, heroic, and uncanny maybe. Because I mean, yeah, you're playing adventures. They're probably all going to be adventures. But I think we don't have one. We don't have a list of these. But I bet you, if we had 5 campaign frames that had different ones, I think they would be useful. Is it the be all end all? No, but I think you're just trying to. That's why it's kind of part 1. You're just trying to get. It's that whole elevator pitch idea. 30 seconds to generate an image in somebody's head. Princess Mononoke, Legend of Zelda, dynamic, heroic, whimsical. Okay, like I got something. Is it maybe matching you exactly? Probably not. But I probably know generally whether I'm in for that or not. So I think it works. But I think obviously you're going to do more. But that's, to me, that's why it's like that's just almost step 0. Like that's the thing. That's the thing you're putting on the poster, or you're putting up the sign. The listing. Your first cut is those, and then this is where the overview, all that stuff is going to fill in all those details to get you. Once you're like, okay, this sounds good to me. Now what's next? And that's you get to the overview stuff. Haven was once the most powerful force in the region for centuries. The high stone walls into the capital bore the phrase, the Godless Gate. While the original meaning has been lost to common knowledge, some dusty tomes and ancient records state that the founders of Haven wished to be free of the influence of the faint divinities that dominated the surrounding regions. They hatched a plan to kill one of the mightiest of these deities, known as Shun-Osh, the Granite Ophid. While their exact method of deicide is forgotten, their victory ensured Haven's dominance in the region for centuries to come. They made their home behind his remains, which became the mighty walls that Haven is known for. But Shun-Osh would have his revenge. As the Havenites carved through his stone body, the fine dust left behind settled into the surrounding earth. There was a time of prosperity over many centuries, while the scales of the god remained undisturbed. But progress is its own pressure. The growing population demanded increased productivity, and as farmers tilled deeper soil and miners hacked into hidden stone, the ancient stone dust rose to the surface. The same walls that brought the city security became the crucible that incubated a virulent plague. Over the last 2 years, over half of Haven's populace fell to a disease known as the Serpent's Sickness. First, victims cough up dust. Soon after, their skin breaks out in a scaling rash. Finally, their body hardens. First the flesh, bones, and soft tissue, spreading until finally their organs ossify. Once within organs, the serpent moves so quickly that sufferers petrify where they stand, filling Haven with statues of victims in their last moments of agony. That's a really awesome image, by the way. The High Magus of Haven, Archmage Phylax, discovered a rare red flower called the Crimson Lady's Veil that could cure the serpent's sickness. These buds grow prolifically across Fanewick in the spring, but for every 10,000 of the common white petal blossoms, only one red flower blooms. Desperate to save their people from the plague, Haven invaded Fanewick to amass the scarce red buds. Their forces plunged deep into the deep wood and, under the guidance of Archmage Phylax, plucked out the reaping eye from the most powerful faint divinity that protected the land, the great owl Nicta, the shepherd of the seasons. The shepherd kept Fanewick in balance by turning her eyes upon the land, first for ripening, then ruination. Thus Nicta maintained the cycle of seasons, of growth and decay, of death and rebirth. With her reaping eye removed, Nicta can only watch over Fanewick with the sowing eye, forcing the land into an everlasting spring. Krako says, a bit too lore-dropey with all these names. I think it's fine, but not as, like, again, it's kind of like, what purpose is the document? If this document is your Bible that you can give people, hey, Paul, appreciate it, thanks so much. I think if your goal is to give people a Bible of like, what do I know? And you can kind of read this at your leisure or ignore it, or you kind of know it, that's fine. I think if you're expecting someone to read all this stuff, if you're writing it and then expecting someone to read it just to decide whether they're interested in your campaign or not, then it's way too much, which is why I'm suggesting stop. When it says hand this to your players who are already kind of on board, yeah, just how about don't write this until you have people on board with part 1. So I guess I'll kind of skip over this part, right? So now we get to communities, and then we get even more information on. So now we get to, the communities that are available. So we have Loreborn and Highborn. This is in Fanewick, and then we have a whole bunch of paragraphs here, and then about I'll just read these first ones, and then we'll just kind of call that red for kind of what's happening with communities. In Fanewick, knowledge is the most valuable commodity, and those who have expertise have the most power. This economy of information functions primarily through gifting and trading, and wisdom would be considered acceptable collateral for a weapon or warm meal. As such, Loreborn community members are the wealthiest in Fanewick and might be smaller, distinct groups of hunters, historians, or artisans within larger villages. So it's not so much a settlement as it's kind of like almost a class, like a social community. And then we've got some questions you can ask. What knowledge did your community teach you that you must now protect or share? What are you able to accomplish because of your upbringing that others outside your community do not understand? You once traded important knowledge for something terrible. What did you impart and what did you gain in return? These are all great questions, but they're just out of place for your kind of like your campaign pitch document. Like this is stuff you go over like when you're doing character creation, which is why I can see that once you have players who are on board, hand this to them and say, great, here's, maybe I would organize it a little bit. So if you just want to jump to some stuff, you can. But I guess you can do that anyway. But there's a whole bunch of those. Then you have your ancestries, which there's bits of details for each one of these, such as Galapa and Ribbits. Many families of Galapa and Ribbits who lived in the bogs of Fanewick were displaced when Haven's army invaded. It's not a big detail, but still there's one of these, some of this for a bunch of these. So that's more you have to put. Now you have stuff about classes. So about druids, rangers, and sorcerers, they are commonly found throughout Fanewick. If players choose one of these classes, they should consider how their character's connection to the natural world might be impacted by the Witherwild. Then we get into GM principles, which we have bullets and then explanation. And again, are we expecting somebody to write all this stuff up? Like, here are my GM principles, and not just the bullet points, but also the paragraphs explaining them all. Not that it's necessary, and player principles, but it's a lot, right? Okay, so player principles. I'm just going to read the bullets. Make the invasion personal. Treat death with importance. Embrace vulnerability. And then for GM principles, paint the world in contrast. Show them true danger. Offer alternatives to violence. Create multi-dimensional allies and adversaries. I don't know if for the campaign doc, if I'm doing this for my own campaign frame, I need the GM principles. Or maybe I would write them so that they're player facing. Like, I'm going to show you, like, there will be true danger. This is a world in contrast. There will be alternatives to violence. You will have multi-dimensional allies and adversaries. Croco says, it feels like general guidelines, not very campaign specific. Well, I think it's kind of a setting. It's really a setting doc. It is, the advice is generic, but I would imagine that in a different kind of campaign, you would highlight different things. Like, make the invasion personal is pretty specific to this campaign. These other ones, treat death with importance and embrace vulnerability. It might be not, but I think in another campaign, maybe death isn't important, or we're not going to deal with death. So yes, they are generic, but I think you're potentially picking and choosing from a menu to get the stuff you feel like suits your campaign. You're trying to show what your campaign is going to be like by what you expect from the players, which I think is good, but maybe not all up front. So now we have distinctions. Use this information to prepare your campaign. You also share with your players as needed. So this stuff is kind of for you, I guess. But you can play it. So we have, I'm just going to read the bullets. The weeks of the day and night, the serpent sickness, the lady's veil, the Witherwild, the gods of Fanewick. And so we have a bunch of gods, full stacker of stones. I do like these gods that they came up with. Hyacinthus, they who spread small blossoms. Ikla, the sky painter. Uv, the watcher of the night bloom. Quigar, whispered sweetness for a thorny end. Rokin, the wandering horn. All very cool. We have some mechanics. The inciting incident. Session 0 questions. The filer at the end of it. So that one's probably not 10 pages long, but it's also 2 columns. So if you put this in a one, and I think it's very good. I like it as a campaign or setting Bible document that you write up. But I just, in terms of when I see people's enthusiasm for the thing, and then I see, or at least I'm reading how people intend to be using it, it seems like this is just like too much. It's going to put this to me puts way too much pressure on somebody way too up front. And I don't think they mean to, because they don't really say before you pitch your game, you need to fill out all this stuff. But unfortunately, just the way it's kind of written is, hey, and I do like that presumably when they're doing their campaign frames that they will follow the same format so that you'll be able to, and I know people are already publishing campaign frames and stuff. So I think there is an opportunity to establish this format so that someone coming to pick something to play can look at these frames and get a lot out of them in a nice ordered way that's kind of unified format across the Daggerheart ecosystem. I think that's really cool. But I think, man, please, if you're a prospective Daggerheart GM, just start with the pitch, tone, themes, and touchstones, and then stop. And then once you get people who are like, I read all that and I'm in and I want more, then go and write up the rest of it. Heck, you could even do some of the, like taking a page out of something like Ironsworn. If you feel like it, you can even have like a session -1 or part of session 0 where you can build up some of this world building stuff with your players and then write it into the document and have kind of a fun, collaborative kind of dealio, which takes some of the pressure off you. Because when you look at this one, and then you might see some other ones where people are really enthusiastic and have ripped off 10 pages like it was nothing, you're going to feel like, oh man, if they did it, like that's what I'm expected of me. And I would say, no, I would never expect somebody to hand that to me unless it was a really established campaign. Like if you've been playing the same campaign for years, you probably have enough material you could just copy paste and have it in there and going. And because you've been playing, because you've got all that. But man, for a brand new thing to just say, like, I don't even know if anyone wants to play this, but I'm going to write up all this stuff. Whew, too much. Anyway, I wanted to take a look at it today, so thanks for hanging out while I did. This has been a long stream, and I'm sweating like crazy because it's about 1,000,000 degrees outside in New York City. It's actually not that hot, but it's humid. And I don't have the air on right now, so I'm feeling it. And it's Friday, so everyone have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. I will be back. Oh, next week I'm going to be traveling for a bit. I'm going to Maine, a little family trip up to Maine. So we'll be back for sure on Wednesday. Prior to Wednesday, it might be a little bit dicey. We'll see. I don't know if I'll have the wherewithal to record something to queue up, but we'll see. In any case, I'll see you when I see you. Beyond that, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you watch or listen to this. Game on, everybody. And I'll talk to you later.